What's new in filmmaking technology this week? News, reviews, education, insights, opinions, and ideas from the CineD newsroom with Nino Leitner and Johnny Bahiri. This is Focus Check, the weekly Cinetech podcast.
Welcome to episode 37 of CineD Focus Check. Hi, Johnny.
Hello, Nino. How are you?
I'm good. And how are you?
I'm fine. There's so much to talk about today.
Yeah.
So where do we start?
It feels like we've moved back into the normal kind of fall announcement cycle. There's nothing major that was announced during the last 1 or 2 weeks, but a lot of still important stuff, I would say. And
can I assume that next week will be really big with announcements?
Next week will be huge. We know that. So hold on tight for next week's episode because there's going to be a lot to talk about there.
You know why? It's almost Christmas, no?
Yeah.
I guess everybody want to show new things so people can.
Well, it's November, and
wallets.
I guess a lot of people are, we're moving into. You're going to Japan for Interbi for the show next week, and there's also Camera Image Film Festival around the corner, which is also something that a lot of companies always wait for in terms of announcing some stuff in the cinema area. So that's exciting. I guess those two events are a good reason to announce a lot of new stuff. But if you want our advice, start to think about ideas how to convince your wife to open the wallet and buy the next best thing. Or husband, yeah. Like whatever you want to buy for Christmas, because there will be a lot of stuff to consider, and good stuff, actually. We are living in a really good time now. It's the end of the year. People need to write off stuff if they have the money. I mean, it's not an easy economy. But anyway, let's talk about talking about the stuff, like upgrading the stuff you already have to save money, which leaves me into firmware updates. And there was 2 big announcements from Canon and Sony in terms of updating their cinema cameras quite recently, actually yesterday. So Canon announced firmware updates for a lot of their Cinema EOS and Pro camcorders. And I'll just go through this quite quickly. I mean, it's nice in general that they actually not only updating their latest offerings, but also a lot of the existing ones. So I think that's really nice about Canon in general. It seems like they... And
Sony. We have to give credit also for
but
Sony.
I mean...
We're talking about Canon now, but in general.
I mean, Sony has been criticized in the past for not doing that, and I think they've gotten the message because they've gotten a lot better with this. Canon always was kind of nice, I think, in terms of updates for their cinema line. Let's move right into it. So one of the most latest cameras, the EOS C400, which was released, I think, to a lot of excitement for a lot of people because it's very, I would say, reasonably priced for what it does.
Absolutely.
Around $8,000, and it's literally a huge upgrade from the C300 Mark III because it's full frame.
It's a modern camera.
It's even an upgrade for the C500 Mark II, which is the full frame one, and it's much cheaper. And now they are already giving a major firmware update, which is adding camera to cloud in-camera activation and transmission of proxy files via wireless or wired internet in this Ethernet in this camera too. So you don't need any additional device. You don't need, like an external recorder or something like that to connect to the cloud to Frame.io. That is very nice if you work, especially in a studio environment, for example. You can already sync the proxies in real time as you're shooting. There is an update to add a 1.5x anamorphic D-squeeze, which is nice because
this is becoming like really the most desirable feature when it comes to anamorphic. Somehow the 1.5 has already the distinguished look.
And it makes sense because it's the perfect squeeze ratio for 17:9 sensors, right? Because you can't do the 2x on a 17:9 sensor. You need the 3x2, which they don't have or don't offer in these cameras. So with the Blazer Reamers and others being so popular, of course that's a much desired feature. So it's nice it's being added. Sony is doing the same thing for a lot of their cameras. I mean, in general, we've been talking about this before.
Sony is not currently doing this to some of the most popular cameras. It will come in the next, but we will talk
but it's coming to it's already on the latest firmware of the FX6, it's there.
Yes, but on the FX3, FX30 is not there. Yeah. It actually was badly missing, and it will come now with the next.
But that's the next top piece of news. Yeah, and so to maintain exposure, shutter, and ISO settings can be added when saving the output frame rate pull down 60. What does that mean? I don't know. I don't understand.
But we don't really have to go point by point now,
Yeah, no, it's like, just interesting. I mean, I didn't. Okay.
Yeah.
It's some small stuff, adding different resolution to monitor out and HDMI interfaces. I mean, it's great to have a 1080p output option on HDMI because, of course, not all HDMI devices allow for a 4K input. I didn't even know that it wasn't there, but good to know. And a communication with some of their new RF zoom lenses, which
that's the big thing here. In general, I think all the lenses will communicate now with the new RF lenses, with the zoom lenses, with the servo zoom.
Same is true for an update for the new C80 camera. So that same update for controlling the zoom lenses is there. Also same frame IO support and basically a lot of the same stuff. And 1080p output through SDI out in HDMI. The C500 Mark II.
Sorry, just about the C80. It's interesting because the C80 is not even in the market. I don't like. You can pre-order it.
Really,
from
it's not shipping yet.
Not shipping yet. So we have a firmware update to a camera which is not available yet.
Nice.
Well,
but it's nice to see that now they kind of move in waves with all their cameras, whereas very often in the past we saw manufacturers just update individual cameras, and I think it's a general trend. Probably hardware-wise, they put them all on a similar platform so they can simply update them all at the same time, which makes a lot of sense, and it's less frustrating for users. But in this case, even for older cameras like the C500 Mark II and the C300 Mark III, we also get some updates, and the C70. And for the C500 Mark II and C300 III, we get the option to the camera output can mirror the camera's LCD display, which is a big deal. And some small stuff like displaying digital teleconverter icon when it's activated. The C70 gets the same updates. It actually gets the same lens support, like the new Cine servo zooms, the 17.1, the RF, which is the newer version. Yeah, so the EF we already had, or the PL actually we already have. The 17.120 Cine servo is now also supported in the 7200 with lens control. That is very nice for a camera that is not new anymore. And some of the other stuff that the other cameras have as well. Same for the R5C even, for those servo zooms, which is nice. And a new subject tracking trigger. Okay, that's nice. Basically,
even the autofocus is being updated.
Autofocus frame can be moved in the display by dragging. Okay, nice. And then also something for the camcorders, XF605 gets improved lens focus ring responsiveness. That's actually something I read that people are frustrated that that's a little bit slow. Glad they're also listening.
This is a very popular camera in Japan. Yeah. In general, some news teams are running with those handycams. That's very in general, it's very popular in Japan to run and gun with those type of handycam cameras. It's funny I say handycam, although this is a Sony. It's a Sony.
It's a Canon.
I don't know, but handycam is a Sony.
It's like a brand. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, it's a good name. It's a good name. It's okay. Cool.
So when is it gonna be available, and is it gonna cost any money, or we are continuing with the trend?
No, it's free.
Yeah,
I think it's free, and they're also adding an update to their app, camera control app for. I think it's only iPhone and iPad. There's not an Android version, as far as I know. And supporting a lot of those is this multi-camera control app, which is nice. So you can have multiple cameras controlling with the app. And is it already available? Yeah, it is. You can already download that.
Click the link.
Click the link. Yeah. Okay. So that's from Canon. Actually, the one piece. Well, we can add this now actually because there was on last episode, I think we talked about a lot of new lenses, including a new RF lenses from Canon. And they call them hybrid lenses. And our writer Omri wrote an opinion article that Canon gets closure 16 years after it started the hybrid revolution. And kind of for a long time, Canon was accused of neglecting filmmakers, videographers, in terms of video features in their DSLR cameras originally, right? They kind of invented the whole thing with the 5D Mark II, but then they took them a really long time to add very necessary features to those cameras in terms of video capabilities, while at the same time they were trying to push the original C300 in their cinema line, and kind of like were accused of neglecting those features in those cameras. And now the article is about the fact that they've really come a long way, which is true. Now they are adding a lot of those features in mirrorless cameras as well. And the new lenses are called hybrid lenses. Now, that is a bit of a, like Omri thinks that I agree with a lot of the commenters on that article, and there's a lot of discussion going on. So if you click the link in the show notes, you will see what I'm talking about. But it's basically a lot of people disagree with the claim that those are real hybrid lenses, because essentially, they look like photo lenses, but they have an aperture ring, which is declickable, which is nice, of course. That's the one feature you really need in lenses to shoot video with. However, they don't have hard stops. They don't have focus gears. So, is the aperture ring enough for doing that?
For calling it hybrid, like for...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the fact that they don't breathe is actually a software feature in most, as far as we know, right? It's usually because Canon has been doing this for a long time, that they have this focus breathing compensation that I think
most of the companies...
Sony actually added later, but they've been doing this for a very long time. So it's not an actual hardware feature that the breathing is not there. So actually the fact that, of course, with RF lenses, they only work on Canon and some RED cameras. The Canons will all have that breathing compensation. I don't actually know about the RED cameras, but they will never work on a Sony camera. They will never work on a Fuji. And maybe they license the mount to something else in the future, but I don't see this happening because Sony is also not doing that for the E-mount. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter that it's a software feature, but yes, they don't actually show any breathing, but it's not a inherent hardware feature like it is with proper cinema lenses that don't show breathing.
So what we want to say here, that a lens with declickable aperture, make it like a easy one, is not enough to call a lens hybrid or to please cinematographers or video makers in that.
Yeah. It is better than before, of course, and having the manual aperture ring is nice. However, it's actually less needed than before, to be honest, because we originally wanted the manual aperture ring on lenses that we could use on different camera systems, right? If you use an EF lens, you can use an EF lens on basically every short flange mount camera. You can use it, you can adapt it to E-mount, L-mount, RF, anything, Z-mount. But you cannot do that with RF anyway. So it ends up being like you can set that aperture in the camera in any case, right? You can set you could set the aperture instead of on the lens. You can just do it through the camera because you can only use it on a Canon camera anyway or on a RED camera. So the kind of necessity for a manual aperture ring isn't there anymore as much as there used to be because
I don't think so. You always need if you want a smooth transition of controlling the light that enters the lens, especially what you are on the run, it's always easier to make it on the lens itself.
Yeah, of course, that's absolutely true. However, I prefer to do that through ND, but sometimes you don't use an ND. So anyway, but it's nice to have, but our point being that maybe this is not enough to call them a hybrid, especially in a time where we're seeing the first cinema lenses, like the actual cinema lenses with autofocus coming out, which we talked about your Blazer Apex review, the Sigma lens that was teased at IBC which is actually an actual cinema lens, which has the possibility to enable autofocus. So this is kind of coming from a different angle, right? It's starting with a cinema lens design and adding the quote unquote photo feature of autofocus, which is not only photo anymore, and adding this to a cinema lens. So you could call this hybrid too. And for me, is this more for videographers, filmmakers? This is a more interesting choice. I think if you have the choice between the two, I would rather go with something that has built-in gears, that has actual hard stops, and the added ability of autofocus versus the other way around. We'll be back after this message from our sponsor.
1 Minute Tips by Fujifilm and CineD. Let's talk about that naughty word that all camera people despise. Audio. If you have a budget, chances are your production can spring for a separate audio person, but sometimes it might just be you out in the field. To make this less daunting, here's a recording tip to ensure you're going into post with the best possible audio quality. You might have heard the advice to keep your audio at -12 decibels, but what does that really mean? The ceiling for digital audio signal is set at 0 dB, so any data louder than that will, in most cases, not be recorded, and will sound clipped, kind of like this. To avoid it, keep your average levels at -12 dB, a safe convention as typical human speaking doesn't fluctuate enough to clip that 0 dB ceiling. Careful not to have your volume too low either, as there's always some digital noise present, so you still want your recorded audio to stand out. As long as your average is somewhere between -12 and -20 dB, you should be golden. More audio tips coming soon. 1 Minute Tips. Until next time.
And now back to the show. Let's move on to the Sony updates. Sony also announced firmware update roadmap for the cinema line. So those are firmware updates that are not available yet.
Some of them will be available during 2025. All the way to 2026. But it's nice that Sony actually has a roadmap. I think that people can expect. They know what to expect.
That's one thing we asked them to do again, basically. Everybody gave them the feedback that in older days, Sony always even launched cameras and already announced a roadmap for firmware updates. So even though some of the cameras didn't have all the features initially, you knew what to expect and when it was coming. Because we always recommend to buy a product based on what it is right now and not what might come in the future. But if they really, in the past, they really said on this date or in this month, we estimate to have this firmware ready and it will come and it will be a free upgrade, then it makes sense, of course, even because you kind of have the guarantee, not really, but it's kind of like a guarantee that it's coming. And Sony stopped doing that. They haven't announced any significant roadmaps when they were releasing cameras recently, and I think they've gotten that message that people really expect that, and now they're doing that again, which is nice, even though some of that is really going to be only available in over a year from now, but at least we know it's coming.
Yeah, that's also good in terms of people shouldn't really rush all the time to change cameras, or that means that there's a longer shelf life to the tool you're working with. And when we're going to go through some of the what's going to be added, you can see. And actually, I want to start with the FX30 and the XF3 because those are very popular.
FX3,
those are very popular and very affordable. So one of the main things, it will get what Sony calls the Big 6 menu, which is similar to Burano and the Venice, which is literally the ability to click on the button and get the most desirable features at a glance, like ISO, frame rate, LUT, NDs, and a bit more.
And adjust them.
Adjust them, of course.
Now you can change them directly from that first screen on the touch screen.
That's right. And the other two things which are really, for me personally, I really like this update. One is the disc-quiz mode, viewing disc-quiz for 1.5, which is for anamorphic and which is very much desirable. Again, like the Canon that we just talked before, the 1.5 is really becoming almost like a, in between price and capabilities and aesthetic. That's probably the golden, how you say, the golden...
Golden nugget,
no,
gold standard,
gold standard now. Those are simply
for
affordable.
1670x9 sensors.
Yeah, and the other thing is HDMI RAW output for Blackmagic RAW recording, and you already covered it for the FX6 that was available, and now it will come to the FX30 and the FX3, which is nice.
Just one thing about the anamorphic D-squeeze. I mean, one of the things you struggled with on the Blazar Apex review when you were using an FX30 was the fact that actually if you use the D-squeeze that is a 133x squeeze lens, right? But it automatically disables the autofocus in the camera.
And the stabilizer. But those are not being fixed here. Maybe in 2027. I don't know.
But maybe this is one type of feedback we should give them, because of course
given, written, noted, and everything.
Okay.
And we will.
I mean, it's a niche thing, of course. So far, we don't even have. I mean, those are the first lenses in the market that have autofocus in anamorphic, but I'm sure it's only going to be more. So I think it's easy. It would be easy for them to simply not disable this, because you can always manually disable stabilization or autofocus if you need to. But if they just don't do that disabling, it would work.
Let me say differently. If they do it, I would like to know why. If there's a technical reason, why when you work with an anamorphic autofocus, the stabilization and the autofocus capabilities are actually being disabled, I would want to know why. Yeah, and then I mean I'll see the guys in the Sony, some of the Sony people next week in Interbe in Japan, and I guess I'll be able to ask this and hopefully get an answer and share it with you guys.
So those you just mentioned are FX3 version 7. Wow. Version 7 and FX30 version 6. It's already
becoming an aging camera.
It already can. Well, it tells you also how popular the camera is, because like how many cameras can you think of that Sony actually gave 7 major updates to after release? That's kind of amazing. And also FX6 is getting version 6, and it will also get some of the same stuff, including the so-called Big 6 menu, which, like Johnny said, is similar to the Burano and Venice, and gives you full control of ISO, frame rate, LUT, NDs, and more from the touch screen without going into, like pressing an additional button basically on the FX6. And that's a big one, because that's annoyed me before. Camera data will no longer be overlaid on top of the image in the viewfinder to allow operators to see the full image and necessary data more clearly. So yeah, that's basically nice that you have this option to switch that off now, and because some of it was always there, and it will also add this update for Blackmagic RAW recording with Blackmagic Design's Video Assist monitor recorders. And unfortunately, this will only come in February 26, and this is always strange for me why it takes that long to add this fairly small updates in a way, but that's how it is. I mean,
I would never, after knowing how things are working, I will never call any update a small update, because you literally have to make sure that you're not breaking any of the other features that are already existing. Yeah. So the last thing that you want is that the camera will become a brick.
No, it's just funny because the FX6 is really now, I mean, everybody's hoping for a new version at some point. And it's not a new camera anymore. And we're talking about an update that is literally 15 months away. So, yeah.
Let's look at the positive side. We know when it's coming.
Exactly. Okay. Let's move on to the Venice 2 version 4 update. Now that for sure, I mean, with all the high-end cameras, they don't replace them as often. And the Venice 2, I think, is still a fairly new camera. And they are adding support for the EL zone system, which was this kind of like false color exposure value system developed by Lackman ASC, which is an intuitive way of actually exposing and defining like what is properly exposed and what isn't and what is overexposed, instead of using the typical IRE system. So it's still back to a relationship between lighting and lens stops, and it comes in addition to the existing tools. I think it's nice to have this built into the camera. I mean, of course, this is always something you can use with an external monitor. And
yeah, but it's nice if it's in the camera.
Yeah, but arguably, I mean, yeah, a lot of people already use it with external monitors. Small HD is big in this, and I think the Small HD OS really already supports this for most of their newer monitors or all of their newer monitors. And it also says that based on users' feedback, version 4 will offer the ability to display frame lines in different colors, simplifying the ability to shoot images for multiple delivery formats. Makes sense, of course. I mean, if you shoot something, I don't know what the frame...
Instagram, you mean?
But in general, that the different colors, because usually you only have one option. If it's white, I don't know what the color in the Venice
I guess it's going to be red and green, and then because we already
because
have
if you're shooting
cameras,
something high, you can't see them anymore. Yeah, like something bright.
I think I've seen it. I can't remember now with which camera, but you literally Panasonic announced something similar actually with the S9 update. That you'll be able to see in different colors the different frame measurements. Yeah, that would be nice.
This Venice 2 update will come August 25, and they actually already announced that there will be, I mean, they say that they are protecting the investment of owners and rental houses, already kind of announcing without details a version 5 update, which will be available in 26 and a version 6 in 27. So that's
how
nice.
old am I going to be by then? But hey, it's crazy. But nice. Again, we know when it's coming.
Yeah, and that something is coming, that it's not going to be discontinued, which is also kind of a hint that maybe there won't be a newer version of that camera by 27. We don't know.
Want to speculate here.
Yeah. Okay, and then last but not least, Burano version 2. That's a big one, I think, because there's been a lot of requests for updates to the Burano. And it includes new recording formats, which is nice. A new 1.8 times D squeeze for anamorphic lenses and monitoring improvements. Version 2 will have a new 3.8K full frame crop. I always find it funny they say full frame crop. It's like saying black milk, you know what I mean? It's like, what is a full frame crop? It's not full frame anymore if it's as a crop, right? And it's not milk if it's black. But anyway, Sony calls it a full frame crop. They also have this on the FX9, which is a 5K full frame crop on a 6K sensor. And but now there's also a new full frame crop on the Burano for 3.8K, and that leverages nearly the entire sensor. Well, it can't be the entire one if it's a crop, and it can shoot up to 120 frames per second. I think it's their way of saying, like, we can't do 120 frames per second on the entire sensor, but we're giving you something that's close to full frame, which is able of doing 120 frames per second. And so faster sensor performance, and with that, and other new recording formats include the addition of 24p to XOCN 16:9, which I didn't even know wasn't there, but yeah, it's good that they're adding it. I already mentioned the full frame 3.8 16:9 up to 120 frames per second. There's going to be a new Super 35 4.3K 4:3 aspect ratio mode for anamorphic with up to 60 frames per second, which is of course nice. So having slow motion on, it's not fully open gate, of course, but it is 4:3 in Super 35. Nice to have, which is, I think, enough for most traditional anamorphic lenses, which cover Super 35 anyway. And there's going to be a Super 35 1.9K 16:9 mode, which gives you up to 240 frames per second. So there is a way to actually shoot kind of super high speed with this camera, but with spherical lenses, because it's it's 16:9, and it's not for anamorphic. So yeah, nice.
Yep, good. So that's also will be for free, and when the time comes, we will report on those enhancements individually.
When is this update coming? It's in
this one, March 2025.
Oh, that's fairly
just
soon.
around the corner.
That's around. I mean, that's really something. Unfortunately, I think we still don't have an open gate mode for 3x2 with the Burano, because that's something that a lot of people were wondering about, because it's, I think we have this with the C400, which is a much less expensive camera, and it also shoots RAW internally, compressed RAW. This is Canon RAW, and the Burano is 3 times as expensive, and it doesn't do 3x2 open gate. So yeah, I mean, it's good. Competition is always good for the market. So I hope that Sony, I'm sure they will do whatever they can to enable more features, but beyond version 2 of that firmware update, for this camera, they have not announced that there will be another update a year later, but we hope it still will be the case. All right, let's move on to Apple. That was already like last week, but we haven't talked about it last week. So Apple announced finally M4 coming to MacBook Pro, Mac Mini, and iMac. And unlike last year, where they did a Mac update event for the M3, if you all remember, it was like, I think they called it Scary Fast, and it was around Halloween as well. And they did one event where they, in a half hour, announced all the updates, kind of upgrading everything, spec bumping most of the Macs to M3 processors, and it kind of went and like it was there and it was gone, and like every reported about it in one day. They kind of staggered it this year, which marketing wise makes sense. So they did like 3 different days. They announced MacBook Pro updates to M4, Mac Mini updates, and iMac updates. 3 different events on 3 days, but essentially the same thing. So all of those computers were upgraded to M4. The MacBook Pros and the iMac kind of didn't change in design. It kind of really spec bumps, higher speed, simply, honestly, a lot of people are talking about this, but the M series processors are so fast that a lot of people don't see the point in upgrading because they're already happy with what they have. And I think it's true for us.
For us too, we have the M3, we have the laptop.
We have the M2 Max.
M2 Max?
We are the M2 Max,
M10,
yeah.
Okay.
And we bought them like 2 years ago. And we're happy. We're like well spec'd, and it was really, I've never had a laptop which was literally capable of doing
M2
anything.
Max.
Anything I'm throwing at it. Yes. I ordered them, so I know. And but basically, so it's I think, of course, it's great that they're upgrading it because we saw the iPad have the M4 since May, and it was a bit curious that the iPad of all devices was the first one to get the newest processor. So now they're moving down the line and updating everything else. The most interesting upgrade in this whole announcement saga last week was, however, the Mac Mini, because the Mac Mini for the first time actually changed in size. The Mac Mini, since it was announced a long time ago, I think this was still announced by Steve Jobs, I think in 2011, if I recall correctly, and it never changed its footprint. So, but now it did. So the Mac Mini is now smaller, and it looks more almost like, in terms
Apple
of footprint,
TV,
like the Apple TV or even like a Mac Studio. And of course, because of the thermal requirements of the M4 just producing less heat and consuming less power, they were able to shrink it down. There's some YouTube channels that already took apart the old Mac Minis and compared to the new ones, and you could see that in the last generation of the Mac Mini, there was actually a lot of empty space, which is kind of unusual for Apple because they didn't need the space anymore on the old enclosure. That's the size comparison you can see here. It's kind of significant. So it's tiny. And of course, it's great because this can go in so many places. We've seen this with the old Mac Mini before, where people have put them in racks and like put 10 next to each other to have a really powerful supercomputer. And now you can put even more in a smaller amount of space. Don't forget, this never comes with keyboard or mouse. You have to buy this extra pricing.
Or screen.
Or screen, of course not. But yeah, so basically it's a lot smaller and it has the M4, and you can really spec it up with the M4 Max. I think the fastest processor you can get in terms of M4 is now in the Mac Mini or the MacBook Pro. And that's kind of significant because it's really tiny. And I know a lot of people who actually travel with this, who prefer to work with screens because if you are, for example, you're kind of commuting, I would say, between 2 spaces. Let's say you have a holiday home or a home and an office, and people are literally taking this from A to B because they want to work with bigger screens than with a laptop. So the
screens are somewhere?
The screens, you have just a screen there and you have a screen in the other place because screens are cheap. And you just move around. And also, I've seen like DITs. A lot of DITs use Mac Minis on their racks and just bring them on set because, you can spec them up. And that's a really, really interesting thing to do, of course, in terms of capability to have all this speed in such a small package. And it says it's up to twice as fast as the M2 Pro, which is also significant. For the iMacs, unfortunately, the iMacs now they come in much more saturated colors, which is nice. The colors look nice. However, in terms of Pro features, we still don't have the 27-inch iMac back, which my heart bleeds for that. I've been a user for the the 27-inch versions of the iMac over the last 15 years, I would say. And I've only kind of gotten rid of my Intel iMac 27-inch 2 years ago when we bought this, and because it was good enough for a lot of stuff, and because the screen is so amazing. It's a 5K screen, and it is still not easy to get a screen like that at a good price. I mean, there's a Samsung screen that was announced like last year or something, which should now be in the market, but it wasn't really. It's weird. I mean, you still have a hard time finding a screen that is as good for an affordable amount of money. And Apple hasn't replaced the 27-inch. So now we have the 24-inch still, and you don't even get the highest processor speeds with this. So you don't have any of the M4 Max chips in this design. It's only the normal M4, and I think it maxes out at a 10-core CPU and 10-core GPU, 16-core neural engine, and 32 gigs of RAM, 2 terabytes of SSD, which is much less in general than the Mac Mini and the MacBook Pro. So you can clearly see they really want pros to buy the Mac Studio, the Mac Mini, and the MacBook Pro, and not the iMac anymore, which is interesting and a bit unfortunate also because you can't even use, I mean, I still have the 27-inch iMac, but you can't use them as an external screen anymore, which was possible on a previous version. So that is a bit unfortunate. But anyway, that's how it is. And another piece of Apple news, we've learned that Apple acquired Pixelmator, which is essentially a competitor of Photoshop. And it's interesting. It's different to Photoshop in a sense that it's a non-destructive photo editor, so more like Lightroom. And we don't, of course, know yet what their plans are with Pixelmator. So far, the Pixelmator team, I think, is Lithuania-based small company. And it's a very popular software that I personally haven't used much, but I only hear good things about it. And they said that for now, for the first time, the app will remain as it is. I mean, if history is anything, we know that people like Apple really likes to integrate stuff. So, I mean, we've seen this many, many, many times with software that Apple has acquired. Even the original Final Cut was an acquisition, I think, before in 2000 or 99. And then they made it theirs. But so, yeah, I expect this to be integrated. But it's interesting because if you remember, the original raw photo editor kind of in the market was Apple Aperture. That was an amazing piece of software, and Lightroom only came around, I think, 2 years after that in like 2007. Unfortunately, Aperture was discontinued in 2015 after, unfortunately, like with many Apple Pro software products, it's been neglected for many years, and then it was simply discontinued. And they kind of gave this market to Adobe and Phase One. And now we see this. I mean, we see them acquiring a similar piece of software again. And we know that they discontinued also iPhoto, which of course was their consumer photo app, and made kind of merged some features into the Photos app, but of course it was missing most of what Aperture could do. So here's a bit of hope that there are plans to maybe make a pro photo editor, which is Apple branded again. And well, this article, we had a really interesting comment, and thank you to Thomas, who I don't have his last name, but Thomas commented that a couple of points were missing in this article, and I think it's worth pointing them out because he said that Photomator uses the Photos library from Apple. So it actually was already bringing back a lot of what was missing with the demise of Aperture. And he said that basically it's so well integrated with all the Apple products already that it made so much sense for them to acquire it. And it's also that he also said that Pixelmator Pro has become very popular with Final Cut and Motion users because it can export motion projects. A complex design can be created in Pixelmator and export a motion product. And when opened in Motion, all the graphics and layers are there, which is nice. I mean, you can really edit it. And yeah, so basically we had this gap of a design application in the Apple Pro software lineup, and let's see what they will do with it. He also said, and that's right, I mean, probably Apple was a little bit under pressure after Affinity was unfortunately acquired and by Canva. So basically that was not available anymore. And that means that now Canva is a big company and Adobe is a big company. And there's not, I mean, that was literally one of the last smaller, very popular pieces of software of non-destructive image editors that was kind of available.
But that's a good business idea in general. If you are a small company and you make a product already to integrate really well with a much bigger one, and then hopefully whoever owns the bigger one will look at you and say, that's worth acquiring.
Yeah, and we see with, I mean, we already saw in May with the introduction of Final Cut for iPad that Apple is investing again into developing in the Pro field of apps, which is nice. And even doing new stuff here, which we haven't seen in a very long time. So let's see what's going to happen here. All right, let's move on to audio, and that's a question for you. So we just saw the introduction of a new Saramonic product. What is it?
That's the Saramonic Ultra, and just that I will be in sync.
Mm-hmm.
So many of us know Saramonic. Many of us are also working with Saramonic products. The company is in China. Hopefully we will be able to visit them sometimes next year. And this time they're bringing a new wireless mics to the market. We know that this is really one of the most popular type of microphones in general, the transmitters and the receivers. Small one like DJI Mic 2 and the Holy Land also have some stuff. Rode has some stuff.
So transmitter with a built-in microphone.
That's right. So it's really for from the run and gun shooter all the way to events and whatever we do with microphones. It's just the form factor is very familiar. It's a two-piece kit and a transmitter, and it all goes into a case that actually charging the whole thing. But this time, what Saramonic is adding is two major features. One is finally 32-bit float recording, which we already seen with other companies, but now this is really becoming the new standard. And I'm very happy that Saramonic is introducing this because that will bring even more competition to this market. And the other thing is timecode synchronization. I'm not 100% yet familiar how that's gonna work, but there will be probably a timecode generator within this device, and that will allow easy synchronization for multicam and so on.
So basically, you'll have timecode already attached to the audio file that is recorded on the transmitter, which is you can use as a backup, but also usually the 32-bit is only recorded on the body, right? It's usually not wirelessly transmitted.
It's not, and this will be the case also here.
Mm-hmm.
Other things to remember with this new device, first of all, it will have an internal memory of 8 gigabyte, which is really good. So you can really record plenty of either 32-bit or whatever form bitrate that you like. They will also have, they call it clear voice.
Noise reduction.
It's a noise cancelling, and I'm very curious actually to hear and see how they implemented this, because in the past many companies literally have one kind of a stamp for noise reduction, meaning if you use it in different environments, it's not necessarily that you will really get good noise cancellation.
And it's often a bit extreme.
That's right, and you can see it's actually being implemented very well with some headphones, because there is a way to ask the microphones on the headphones to determine the noise and the type of noise, and then it will cancel the noise accordingly. So you get much better noise cancellation. So I really wonder if this is working by listening to the environment, or this is like a fixed pattern of noise reduction, because they have few like two modes. Yeah, this is only time will tell. I'm very curious to hear this.
And it records you can record 2 lanes, right? Like 2 different levels.
Yeah. There's like.
But is it possible, or we don't know, maybe, is it possible to have the noise reduction only on one of them and the other one is just clear?
I don't think so, but we will have to see when and if we get this device. Two other things to mention here. One, it's IPX5 waterproof, so I think you can easily work with this.
That's a first,
outdoor.
I think.
That's as far as I know. Yeah, and the other thing is it has a built-in or attachable antenna to the receiver, so that will actually I think you can get up to 300 meters distance between the transmitter and the receiver, which is quite nice.
That's massive, considering that most of those devices work with Wi-Fi. I mean, those kind of prosumer audio transmitters.
Yeah, so it will be on the 2.4 gigahertz platform, but it's really it's nice that they made something like this. So I think all in all, it looks like a very solid product.
What's the price?
$299. So let's see how it's going to compete with the DJI mic. If I'm not mistaken, is $349, and the HoloLens Lark Mark II is, I can't remember by heart, but this is doesn't have the 32-bit float, for example.
And
so
the Rode Wireless Pro.
Rode is, I think, $249 maybe. Let's quickly check B&H.
Yeah, $249.
$249. Yeah, but again, maybe for some.
No, sorry, it's $349.
$349. Okay,
yeah.
Then obviously it's a cheaper version and
$366 on B&H.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a bit more expensive. Yeah. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so I'm very much looking forward for this Saramonic Ultra device. Again, looks like the company is really thinking how to cater many of us in terms of. And one thing is, I really wonder how the logo will be on the.
It's small.
Transmitter.
It's like we have a photo here, and it's you have a photo here. It's much smaller than most of the others.
I hope so, because we all know
it's fine.
Somehow it became like a marketing thing. I think Rode started that. Everybody else followed, and
it's a smart idea for branding. And you see that a lot of content creators don't seem to care about this. And it's every time I see it, I'm like I'm just shaking my head.
Yeah, black gaffer tape became my best friend when I'm traveling. Just that I will have enough to cover this.
It's almost like I would pay more to not have a logo on those things.
Imagine.
Maybe it's just to have a no logo version.
Exactly.
Good. And then you get the stickers you can put on. Okay. But we also had another announcement of a similar product last week.
Similar but very different. I mean, we have to say.
But in the same thing, Sennheiser, it's called Profile, 2.4 gigahertz, two-person wireless audio system, kind of the same thing. However, it comes also with a charging brick. But this brick is also, this is a nice idea here. And I think this is also the selling point. That the brick itself is also a handheld device. So literally it's easier to make the whole transmitter, like for interviews, for example, it's so
nice.
So they want you to hold this with a little foamy thing.
Yeah, I really wonder if it transmits any. Some of those devices are very sensitive when you touch them.
But it's the same as we have with Rode, right? Rode has the same thing. You have this plastic grip where you put the thing in top, and then you have it looks like a handheld microphone.
Yeah, it's achieved the same aim, but at the end, I personally would have expected much more from Sennheiser. I mean, there is no 32-bit float here. No time code and so on.
But it has a locking pin connector, and it looks like the whole device is made of metal, which like all the transmitters, which is not the case for a lot of the competitors. But yeah, it doesn't have 32-bit.
It doesn't, and at least the logo is not so big. But yeah,
oops, yeah. Let me just look. But I mean, they're all kind of the same size. I guess the next generation of those things will be making them smaller. And I'm still surprised how many people just put them on. I mean, it's still something I don't like to see because
I'm using it a lot, Nino.
It's very distracting for me to see this now. I mean, we used to care. I mean, I'm spending a lot of time to actually hiding lavalier mics on set, and now suddenly people put
that was the keyword.
Put like
on set, of course. But when
now
I'm
you put like a pack of cigarettes on your neck.
No, I mean when I'm doing run and gun, when you need to be fast, when you need there are some reasons why to work with that way.
We have a microphone guy sitting here. Felix, what's your take on this?
I don't want to insult you in any way, Felix. Yeah. I'm on Nino's side and your side too when it comes to certain productions. But I'm just saying when there's some things that it's for me absolutely legit
Of course.
to use the microphone, and not only that, also to use the built-in microphones, because those made a very long way when you compare it to how it was 2 years ago, for example. For some of the stuff that we are doing, which has to be fast.
Yeah, it's fine. It has everything has its justification. I'm just saying, I'm a little bit, bummed how it's become normal to see this on all kinds of videos. Whereas it seemed like, it didn't used to be something that people wanted to see.
True. That's true. But
especially because it has the logo also of the manufacturer on it. But yeah, it's good for them. It's good for marketing. And then of course, if a creator uses this, others will see, like, oh, what is this? They Google it and they buy it.
Sure.
It's like free advertising for them, which makes sense.
This is also $299. So
it's a good price for a Sennheiser product.
Come on. I'm just asking you, if I had to choose between this one or the Saramonic Ultra, not based on quality, because we don't know the quality, but based on specifications.
Based on specs, it's a
based on
gap.
specs, the Saramonic is a better deal. Now, of course, what really left to check is
how long it lasts.
And the audio quality.
And the audio quality, of course. Yeah. Good. Let's move on to something completely different. ZEISS just announced an update to their CinCraft scenario, which is their camera tracking software. Now, we have to say we're not experts in this. And it's something I've seen demoed on trade shows, but I don't claim that I have so much clue about it, to be honest. But it is a big deal for people who need camera tracking in different environments for virtual sets and so on. And basically now with version 2.1 of the ZEISS CinCraft scenario, cinematographers can manually calibrate lenses without an available pre-filled template. So basically they're saving time because you can manually calibrate any lens and you don't need to run through their templates anymore. And they already freed it up for third-party lenses earlier this year. I think originally it was only available for ZEISS and ARRI lenses, and now it's already been available for other lenses. You can also export with CinCraft Export. You can export the data to from the proprietary files that the CinCraft scenario produces. So it can be imported in 3D applications like Nuke, Unreal Engine, and Maya, which of course makes it a lot more flexible for all kinds of VFX work. And so I mean, just a little explanation here. Why does ZEISS do a lot of software now? So basically, this was a continuation of their acquisition of NCAM, and they really went into this field, adding the ability to get lens data from their lenses already with the CP3s and the CP3 version of the lenses that could actually export lens data, and they really specialized in this field, which I think makes a lot of sense, where you have more and more manufacturers doing, quite good, well done cinema lenses. It makes sense for ZEISS to go into this virtual production field, which is still something where a lot of workflow issues persist that mean more work if you don't do your work properly on set, meaning, already knowing which lens you're using, what the focal, where the focus is, what the aperture is, all of that data needs to be transmitted directly needs to be recorded so the VFX department can already use it. And CinCraft scenario is their continuation of that trend. And so basically this is available now. I think it's a free update for existing users. Now, this is not something that is for the individual owner-operator, I would say, because the CinCraft scenario base bundle is around $13,000. Then there's an advanced bundle and also an advanced broadcast bundle. But this is really made for virtual production and VFX, and is making their lives easier. Good. And let's move on to a small update from Freefly. Now, we know that Freefly moved into high-speed cameras a couple of years ago after, they've originally been known mostly for the gimbal stabilizers for the Movi series, which is a field that arguably has been taken over by DJI. And then also they've been known for their drones. Same thing with DJI, but they always seem to, they're like a cat. They always fall on their feet and seem to find a market. And they've made a camera which is called Ember. And there's two different versions, the S5K and the S2.5K high-speed cameras. And that's a niche that was dominated so far by Vision Research with their Phantom cameras.
I would like to think of them as a company with always one step ahead, exploring, opening a market, doing something which for the price range was not really available before, or the functionality. And then will come some well-known Chinese companies will conquer this, and they will already move to the next thing. Which, by the way, I will not be surprised, because this is still in a way, this is an uncharted field. This high frame rate cameras. So I will not be surprised if suddenly whoever will come up and say, "Hey, here's an affordable, even more affordable high frame rate cameras." But good to see. And by the way, this is kind of. We know many people that have this camera.
Graham from our team has an
for
Ember,
example,
and he said it's actually a great thing as a DP to have this extra tool available, because then you get booked as the high-speed operator sometimes, where you have a main cinematographer and they book you as a high-speed
which you
guy.
can do by yourself, unlike the Phantom, that usually you do need a dedicated team around some of the cameras in order to operate it. So that's interesting. How much is the camera, by the way?
18,000 for the S5K, so it's really actually piece of cake. I mean, compared to a Phantom Flex 4K, which is like 50K, I think, or more, it's cheap. But so basically, so far, as far as I understand, the thing with these high-speed media for those high-speed cameras needs to be really fast. So usually, you're not able to use like a normal CF Express card or anything like that, because it's never fast enough, especially when we talk about the actual recording. Like, I just know from working with a Phantom Flex that basically it has an internal memory, and that's what makes the camera expensive. Like the difference, there's a version which is like, I don't know the current one, but the one I worked with many years ago on the Phantom Flex 4K, it was like 500 gigabytes internally or 1 terabyte internally. And that actually made the camera a lot more expensive, because it's not just the built-in storage, it also needs to be super fast storage, which makes it so expensive. And the same is true for the Ember, which so far, as far as I understand, only had built-in storage. So you were always limited with capacity. On the Phantom Flex, there is removable media, but it's only saved to removable media after recording. So it's kind of like recording internally on the fast one, and then you can move it to that. But that's what takes time. And if that happens, you cannot continue recording. So a lot of those high-speed cameras are used for wildlife cinematography. And when I was many years ago with a team in South Africa shooting my wildlife documentary, that was exactly the problem. You always need to do like an estimation on, okay, now I'm recording, because it has like a pre-trigger record, for example. So, for example, I press record and it would save the last 10 seconds of whatever happened in front of the camera at 1,000 frames per second in 4K. And then it needs to actually save it to the card, to the external card. And that's what takes time. And during that time, on the more expensive camera, you're able to continue recording for at least 1 or 2 times more. But at some point, you have to stop. You like literally needs to save all the data to the removable media. And that's the challenge here. And with the Ember, so far, as far as I understand, you could only record internally, but now they have added a removable, they called it media expander. So basically, you're able to expand the SSD, internal SSD. It's still, again, a proprietary SSD because of the speed that's required. You cannot just use any NVMe SSD or whatever. So you will need to buy the SSD from Freefly, which is in a special enclosure, which is also with a heat sink and everything that actually dissipates the heat. And there are different options here. But again, it actually makes your camera more versatile, because it will simply expand the available recording time. And there are 3 sizes available: 1.28 terabyte, 2.56, and 4 terabyte. SSDs, and also 2 different versions. There's a a more affordable version which does not offer the pre-record option that I just mentioned, and a more expensive one that will also give you the chance to pre-record. So it's actually quite nice to have this option kind of added to the camera, and I'm sure that makes the camera just a lot more versatile, because from experience I can tell you, if you are, it's really a niche thing to have a high-speed camera, and if you're on a production booked as a high-speed operator, and I know this from the guys we worked with in South Africa. You
can't make the tiger wait for you.
Exactly, you can't make the tiger wait for you. But in general, producers and directors who are not used to working with this, they simply expect that you can do this all the time. And I was the director on this, so I wasn't I was like, I need this. And then I realized, no, it's not working like that. So adding this ability for actually not that much money. Those SSDs are between $1,600 and $4,000, which is, considering how much usability it adds to the high-speed camera, that's actually quite reasonable, I think. That expands possibilities for a lot of people who are using this camera. Yep. Good. Let's move on to 2 new products from SWIT. There's new lights from SWIT.
The MONET series.
I think it's MONET.
MONET. So it's really a French name, huh? Yeah. Really great. The 400 watt and the 700 watt RGBWW, and those are bright soft light panels, mostly to use in a studio. And the selling point of those ones are the noise that they generate. Apparently, this is really very low noise floor. Mm-hmm. So, of course, in studios, it's very crucial. Other than that,
they look quite sturdy.
Exactly, they looks very well. It's like 1x1 and 2x1. And when it comes to pricing, the 1x1 will be approximate $1,940, and the 2x1 $3,230.
And they're bright. The 2x1 delivers 20,000 lux at 1 meter and 2,700 lux at 3 meters.
Yeah.
Beam angle 65 degrees, which is actually not that wide, which is great. So it's more focused.
That's right.
Yeah,
and still very soft. And one thing that we can surely say about the SWIT products, they are very reliable, and usually it's really good value for money.
Been using their V mounts for many years.
The V mounts, they're doing monitors. We are using a lot of their stuff here at the office, and we are very happy with that.
Another product they announced is a transformable ARCA Swiss plate with a V mount, which is quite a tiny product in a way, because it's like $39, but it's very smart. It's simple. It's combining a V mount adapter basically for a battery with an angled ARCA Swiss
very simple but very nice. It's
so you can basically add this on your mirrorless camera and power the mirrorless camera with a V mount, and now finally you have a way to mount that V mount without having it on top or on the side of a cage, because problem with a cage on the mirrorless where you put a battery on top or on the side is that you always kind of block some kind of accessibility of the camera, and if you put it at the bottom, the camera kind of gets too high if you have a camera plate below. So that makes a lot of sense. And you can also use it even
as a mini tripod
really
for
nice. A V-mount battery, and
you can put your
monitors.
Exactly, small monitor.
Yeah, very small thing, which we found worth reporting about, because it's something that's kind of a no-brainer.
And the price?
Yeah, $39.
Yeah, amazing.
So, good. Let's move on to our favorite subject that a lot of people love us for, AI. And there was one. And it's almost like we press the publish button on an AI-related piece of news. I'm counting the minutes for the first anonymous comments who are bashing. Huh? They're always anonymous. It's probably always the same person with different names. It's always a fake email address, and they're always bashing us for reporting about it. So this week we reported about it's a scientific paper that was published by Eyeline Studios, which is powered by Netflix, or probably owned by Netflix. And it's called DifFRelight, and it's defining a process of AI-based facial relighting. And the examples show quite interestingly still images of, and also moving images of people filmed in a very evenly lit space with white backgrounds. And then the processing would give you complete freedom of how to relight that face. And it looks very convincing. I mean, it looks like it's an actual, I mean, it is an actual image, but it looks like it's actual light that
like
was
a
changed.
very good DP was working on those. Huh?
Yeah, and again, that's scaring a lot of people. We just wanted to report about it, that this is now happening. It's not an actual technology yet. It's just, I mean, the method, it's called Gaussian splatting, is explained in this paper and so on. So we just wanted to point this out because it's definitely something that's coming in our near future. So in the future, it will be possible to kind of relight faces. However, of course, they need to be filmed evenly lit. So you can't just modify any kind of footage you have of people that were lit in a different space. So this needs to be purposely filmed for that, which I want to point out.
This is against our nature to create on camera a very nice lit up subject.
Well, I can see this, and that's why I don't think it's threatening in any way, because it's more like I can see this used mostly for video games where they always want to create real characters. But if you, so far, of course, the lighting on the faces on video game characters never looks really real because of that. And now you can film them in a studio with different facial expressions and actually have real-time change of the light as you play the video game.
Really? I think the aspect for me would be different. You can use less qualified people to film something in a very even way, pay them less, and then you do the rest in post and pay them.
Yeah, but you will still, I mean, you will still need a studio that's kind of with a white background, and actually evenly lighting a face is not that easy, especially if the camera needs to move or the person needs to move. So I don't know.
Let's see. But anyway, it's coming.
It's coming. It's possible. Yeah, that's if you want to learn more about it, link in the show notes, of course. And one last piece of news. DJI announced Goggles N3, so basically a budget alternative to the Goggles 3. Now, what's funny about the DJI goggles in general is, I mean, originally they were made for the FPV cameras, meaning the DJI FPV and the DJI Avatar. A lot of people also want to use them with different DJI drones. Now, there's always been, with different generations, they've been compatible with different versions of their drones, which was a bit frustrating to people. And it's the same with this one, because this is compatible with the Avatar 2 and the DJI Neo, but not the other drones, which is always funny. So it seems to be not so easy to make those goggles compatible with every drone, but it's something you need to know. So if you're using either their budget Neo drone or the Avatar 2, you can use this. I mean, I have to say this is a very, very affordable piece of goggles, like pair of goggles. They are only, let me check, they're starting at $229. That's incredible, actually. And what's different to the Goggles 3, for example, you don't have built-in diopters, so you have to use these if you need prescription glasses. You can actually wear them below the headset. Of course, you can always use your contact lenses like I do, so you don't need the diopters. But that's something that they've dropped, and there's a couple of other features missing. However, they are using DJI O4 transmission and an AR cursor, so this is kind of up to date. And you can also share the real-time live feed to a separate device, like a phone, through USB cable. So if somebody's standing next to you, they can actually also see what you're seeing, which is a nice feature of the Goggles 3. So I think it makes sense to add this. It's a bit, I don't know. It would be nice if all the goggles would be compatible with the same drones, but
maybe not possible.
Maybe not possible, but of course it'd be nice. And of course there's also a Fly More combo, which adds the handheld unit I forgot what it's called, but this little handheld unit where you can actually fly the Neo drone and also the Avata 2 by actually moving your hand. And yeah, it's available now. All right, I think that's enough for this week.
Oh, much too much.
Much too much. And we'll be back next week with a lot of interesting stuff. And yeah, stay tuned. Please subscribe to Focus Check on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Give us a good rating. We need it. Give us a like. Leave a comment. Send us any questions that you have. And we'll see you next week. Well, one thing actually I wanted to add, what I forgot. We had a question last week, which I forgot. Somebody actually commented, not a question. Somebody commented and sent us an email. His name is Arnstein Johansson. Thank you for your message. We raised the question last week, why are 7200 telephoto lenses always white? And wondered why it's only those. He wrote to us, the reason why Canon telephoto lenses are white is because of heat reflection. It's better for the photographer on a safari. And I also heard someone mention that the autofocus performs worse when the lens gets too hot. Yeah, okay. Well, it's good to have the two options, the black and white. I find it funny that it's always just the telephoto lenses. But
yeah, good to know.
Good to know. Thank you, and see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.